Welcome to the Jaros Health Podcast, where we make it easy for you to better serve older adults through our content that informs, community that inspires, and courses that deliver.
Hey guys, Alyssa here with this month's Old Not Week segment. And today we're going to be discussing, so I found this pretty interesting article that's kind of surrounding the CrossFit principles. And I've noticed that lately CrossFit and functional training have started to take on as far as the research world is concerned. So it's kind of nice that now these theories are being researched and there is evidence to back these principles we've been using for a while, especially implemented through typical CrossFit workouts and things like that. So this article is called High Intensity Functional Training. So it's HIFT abbreviated, and it's a definition and research implications for improved fitness. So what it started with initially is comparing high-intensity functional training to the common HIIT theories and principles, the high-intensity interval training. So it kind of compares the two, and it looks at, so it defines HIFT as a training style or program that incorporates a variety of functional movements performed at high intensity relative to the individual's ability. And it's designed to improve parameters of the general physical fitness, so cardiovascular endurance, strength, body composition, etc., and performance, so agility, speed, power, strength, etc. So it started to first look at HIIT protocols as mainly unimodal. So you're looking at, running, cycling, rowing, a lot of isolated movements, bicep curls, shoulder press, those kinds of things. And then it also looked at, so then on the other side, HIFT is using more multimodal functional exercises. So these functional exercises are then defined as those that involve the whole body, universal motor recruitment patterns in multiple planes of movement. So you're looking at squats, deadlifts, cleans, snatches, pull-ups, vertical jumps. You're just combining more muscle recruitment patterns, and there's you're working multiple muscles at once, aside from just doing the isolated movements. So, and obviously some HIIT protocols do use multimodal interventions, so that's not a blanket statement, but in the most popular things, most of them do typically use unimodal things. So they looked at multimodal-based HIIT and HIFT, and it provides similar improvements in aerobic and anaerobic adaptations as the more traditional unimodal HIIT programs, but having it multimodal adds a benefit of significant improvements in muscle performance that are not typically observed with either unimodal HIIT or continuous aerobic training. So you're looking at more improvements related to performance and coordination and things like that. So if you're looking at, moving this from just an exercise perspective to then a rehab perspective, most of the things I've noticed lately, reading my PTA's notes and reading just hearing what people are doing. Some people are, we still focus a lot on unimodal things. So more isolated movements. So I had a patient the other day in home health, and we were working on floor transfer things. I do a lot of multimodal, they would call it, functional things, squats. We do hip hinge patterns, picking things up off the ground, deadlifts, kinds of things. So, and at the end of the session, his goal was to transfer from the floor. And at the end of the session, he said, I feel like these exercises are actually helping me, because usually he is a pretty frequent flyer through our home health company. And he said, usually the therapists come in, they put weights on my ankles and then just make me march in a seated position. And he said, I feel like these exercises we've been doing are more applicable and help me with, getting up and off the floor. So I thought that was kind of interesting, and that kind of tweaked me into kind of looking more into this multimodal type of exercise. So we're looking at, obviously some of our unimodal things do have a place. So, isolated hip external rotation is a lot of times very popular, standing hip abduction, things like that. And you can kind of argue that it is a little bit multimodal when you're standing, you're working on single leg stands, those kinds of things, stability on one leg while the other leg is moving. But if we think about it and we start to incorporate, especially with our geriatric patients, if we start looking at more of a multimodal approach, so, working on, if they are a little bit lower level, starting unimodal and then moving to multimodal is, you kind of have to base it on patients and things like that and their abilities. But if we start thinking about more of how can I work more muscles at once? How can I incorporate these multimodal exercises? So when you're looking at, lifting things from the ground, I have patients, at varying heights. We start higher and then work lower all the way to the ground if they can handle it. With a lot of my group exercise participants at a retirement community, I did a lot of jumping with my participants, and most people were hesitant at first, but were able to actually, complete the movement. And jumping, that's, muscular power, strength, and it's full recruitment of the posterior chain as well as the front or anterior plane. So, pushing, pulling, lifting things overhead. I have people do a sit to stand from a chair and then lift a 6-pound little weighted ball above their head as they stand. So it's kind of like a thruster. We're just focusing more on, and I know it's not rocket science, and I know that these are very common principles, but to actually see, to take what is seen as a high-level program like CrossFit and things like that, this functional training to actually put into use to, apply across the continuum of our patients. So they actually did use this HIFT training with cancer survivors, and they only did it for 5 weeks. So most research articles surrounding, exercise programs go out 12 weeks, and most of the time, especially in a home health setting, we don't technically have our plans of care out that far. So I thought this one was kind of interesting because it was only 5 weeks. And they not only had improvements in body composition and 5 of 7 functional performance tests, but they also reported significant improvements in emotional functioning. Now, this was in a group setting, so there was obviously that social component, but I've found that patients are more apt to do things, especially for a home exercise program, if they can see the benefit of it. So practicing step-ups on the stairs, practicing, forward lunges, doing squats, picking things up off the ground or off an elevated surface, because they actually see the direct correlation of how is this going to help me? If I can, be able to get stronger and do this exercise more easily, then that will directly correlate to gait training. It will directly correlate to making me get up the stairs easier. So then that's where this multimodal comes in. I have patients do step-ups on their stairs, like I said, squats, things like that, and explain to them why. And I found that there is a little bit of an increase in adherence to those types of things, and especially with the patient I talked about earlier, he was able to adhere to the home exercise program and was able to get off the floor for the first time in 10 years. So then people see that reward. So kind of keeping that in mind too, as far as, helping with motivation and things like that. And obviously, functional training and things before we start getting to these complex movements and, incorporating these, requiring sequencing and coordination of these more complex movements, you obviously do a screening. And again, maybe you start out unimodal doing simple things, but then progress. So a lot of times people just get their home exercise program and we're kind of falling into this rut of, seated marching, seated long arc quads, ankle pumps, things like that. Standing hip abduction. And it's easy to kind of fall into that rut, but also we have to take, let's start doing some lunges. Let's do mini squats. Let's do sit to stands, putting something overhead and those kinds of things. Even incorporating power into sit to stands, having them stand up fast and then sit down slow. I found patients really actually enjoy doing that. And they're kind of surprised at themselves and they can stand up so fast. So I really recommend reading this article. It's kind of long, and it talks mainly about CrossFit and, moving. It doesn't necessarily directly correlate to older adults, but we can take these same principles that they showed here and move them into, our practice. I want you to think about more of incorporating multiple movements at once. So, pushing, pulling, lifting things off from the ground, incorporating, posterior chain recruitment. I've even had people, so I have a 6-pound weighted ball, and a lot of people, of course, like, wow, that's really heavy. I can't do anything with this. And then there's so many things. I have people stand up and then throw it to me for dynamic. You're also working on upper body push, power, standing up with it, pushing it overhead, like I had said. I have people stand up and then throw it to me immediately to work on dynamic balance with transfers. We do so many things with this ball. I've had people do even short controlled kettlebell swings, working on that power hip extension, and it was $5 on Amazon. So, and I don't have any weights. I don't use ankle weights. Now those things are great, and you could do a lot of good things with those as well. But this ball, I feel like we can do so much incorporating these multimodal exercises. So basically the main takeaway is trying to incorporate this higher intensity functional training and try to incorporate these functional movements to help with motivation of home exercise program, to help more efficiently reach our goals, and to incorporate more challenging for coordination, muscular strength, and muscular endurance, all combined to create an improved performance. So we just have to look more at the bigger picture, which again, I know this isn't rocket science, but sometimes we kind of lose sight of it if we do, get into our ruts or get into kind of a routine of things. So if we take a look at the big picture and we kind of start, and on my last podcast last month, we talked more about how to switch up interventions so we can use those new intervention ideas and kind of just start to use more of a functional approach. So we're getting away from, just seated marching, seated long arc quads, those types of things, just because it's easy to give as a home exercise program. So, and again, they have their time and place if we need them. Not saying all patients are, appropriate to use this, but we all have our clinical judgment and can make those calls. So if we just kind of put just a little bit more effort, into creating more of the functional training, and then hopefully help our patients more efficiently improve their performance. So again, the article is High-Intensity Functional Training, Definition and Research for Improved Research Implications for Improved Fitness, and it comes mainly out of the Kennesaw State University in Georgia. And I did post it in the Senior Rehab group and in the Senior Rehab Project Facebook group as well. So check that out, read it. If you have any questions or anything, always feel free to email me, message me, things like that. And thanks for listening, guys. Let's keep our interventions functional and multimodal. And you guys have a great rest of your Saturday. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Jaros Health Podcast. Go to jaroshealth.com to get the show notes for this episode and find out how you can join the Jaros community for free. You'll get access to our private Facebook group and the weekly Jaros recap, where we share our favorite reads, podcasts, and any interesting conversations in the Jaros community that week. Once again, that's GEROS health.com. Thanks for listening.